Hey friend, Megan here. This evening, I'd like to chat about self-sabotage. And the reason I'd like to chat about it is because I'm in the middle of it. I'm not in the middle of sabotaging myself. I'm in the middle of kind of watching and seeing some patterns that I have that I'd just like to share with you. So I made this commitment to do a video every single day for a week and then once every week. This channel has been a bit start and stop, and I am a mom of 3 little boys and do work. So it's been tricky to figure out the timing, but I also know that I really want to do it, and I've been waking up with inspiration and excitement to do it and just getting encouragement from friends and people watching saying keep going, which I really, really appreciate. But I noticed that I had all this excitement a few days ago, and then I started just scrolling on social media, and I started kind of going down these weird tunnels and realizing my energy was weird. And like, I always noticed the little things around our house. We got a new friend that had moved in, and they were having some health issues, and the boys actually were just a little bit more amped up than normal, and I just felt a little off. And the reason I share this is because for a really, really, really long time, I wasn't self-aware to know when I was taking a nosedive into depression or self-sabotage. I would sort of end up like slumped down in my couch eating instant mashed potatoes and watching marathons of the Kardashians. This was probably about 10-15 years ago. And while I was in therapy, my dear therapist Cindy was telling me, there's ways to notice if you start taking a dive, and you can start to see them in small ways rather than be all of a sudden shocked at the bottom, which is where I felt like I was for a long time. So I just wanted to share that because I do think that, I'm in this with you. There's so much that I've learned through my journey, and I'm so grateful to have found so many tools to help me feel well and not suicidal and generally pretty happy and fulfilled. But I'm still facing myself and still facing life. So I want you to know you are not in it alone. And I've been there, and sometimes I'm still here. So I wanted to say that so I could share this video about self-sabotage. So I think some of the tools that I want to share with you are, like I was saying, starting to notice if you're going down a downward spiral and just starting to dabble in it, tiptoe in it, avoid things, because that can be such a beautiful time that you can step aside, take a breath, reconfigure, and ask some questions. So I went outside and I asked, what am I avoiding? What am I scared of? And part of it was I'm scared of putting myself out there. I'm scared of sharing this stuff. Who is this girl? Who does she think she is? What does she know? And I still ask myself that sometimes. And then I check back in with my mental thought patterns, and I try to show some gentleness with myself. And then another one is to use our mirrors and our reflections. How do you become aware if you're not aware? Well, sometimes you have to use your mirror. So what do I mean by use your mirror? Well, I see people as this possibility for reflection. That's what mirrors do. So one example was that I had asked Eric for a Coke, which I don't drink soda anymore really, maybe once a year. And I made deviled eggs, which is like an old Lancaster County comfort food. And I didn't realize this pattern, but my husband pops out and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "What do you mean? I think I'm doing all right. What's up?" And he's like, "Well, I've noticed that sometimes a Coke and deviled eggs means that you're going down a bad path." not bad, but just starting to go into a bad cycle. I used it again. Going into a negative cycle. And so that was one way for me to go, okay, I'm going to start bringing awareness to my mental health state. My little one might wake up. That's why it's cut a bit. So that was one of my reflections, of an external reflection that checked in with me really early on, which I appreciated. And he was right. And then the other thing is to reflect. So we have the power to do it ourselves too. Sometimes it's a little more tricky because we're a little too close, but it's still really valid and really useful. So I started noticing my sleep patterns were off, and that I was eating late at night, and that I was staying up really late and sleeping in later. And so those kinds of things can be really helpful to see if we're changing our patterns of normal health. The other thing is I look at my plants. If I'm not paying attention to my plants, it's usually an indicator that I'm not really paying attention to life. And the other thing is that my stomach started to get a little bit bloated and gassy and rumbly. And so it was really another one that went, oh, check in, Megan, before we go down into avoidance and self-sabotage and possibly depression, because that was at least the pattern for me, that I would avoid things, and then spiral into a really dark place. And then the other one is balance. Like I started to see that as I got really excited about doing videos, I was actually not doing some of the other work that I had on my plate, or not spending as much quality time and present time with my kids. So those were some of the indicators that I used to start to see that I could start dipping down and I could start going into that negative spiral that I've talked about before. But now it's become easier to see it little by little and to use those reflections, both external and internal, to see if I can, instead of do this roller coaster of the up downs, is what I like to call them, that I can smooth it out a little bit more, and I can see when it's starting to dip, and then I can go back and do some of my self-care things that help me. So I've had a couple little interruptions, and I think I'm going to close it out. My one last little reflection is my kids, where their sleep gets disrupted or their energy is a bit off. So I am going to listen to that, and I am going to go to sleep and bring you some of those self-care things another day. Love from Peru. We're in this together. See you next time.